We're back in session in Department 1, Inglewood. Mr. DeGuerin is at Mr. Durst's side. Mr. Lewin representing the people, Mr. Millison's side. And we have Mr. Bailey and Mr. Miata. Mr. Chesnoff is present as well. I took under submission the motion for mistrial and adjournment after the people stipulated that to the testimony of Dr. Klein based upon his report and to the admission of the medical records. And I am prepared to rule. And is there anything else you wish to add, or do you submit?
There we go. No, submit.
I reviewed the cases, Dr. Klein's report, and the medical records from LA County, USC. Dr. Klein's letter is not entirely objective in the court's view. It ignores the fact that Mr. Durst has not always been compliant with his treatment during this period. It also speculates that a return to jail and to court was the major motivating factor of the attending medical professionals, thus impugning their judgment. Dr. Klein's defensive about his own possible bias. But more importantly, and fairly, Dr. Klein's report utilizes a framework which focuses upon Mr. Durst as a patient and describes the most desirable treatment, in other words, an ideal. Likewise, our highly able defense counsel, among the best criminal defense lawyers in the nation, compare what they're able to do in the present circumstances with an ideal far exceeding what the Sixth Amendment guarantees. Counsel vividly described Mr. Durst's present disadvantages and what would be better for Mr. Durst instead. The court, however, must, along with Mr. Durst's interest, also consider every other person who would be adversely affected by the further delay of this complex capital murder prosecution. That's what Penal Code Section 1050 requires. It requires balance. Thus, notwithstanding Mr. Durst's significant health concerns under People v. Avila 117, Calap 4th 771, and even considering United States v. Duran 328 Federal Supplement 1261, there is no due process violation, nor is there any violation of the right to counsel in proceeding with trial. Even looking to the federal authorities the defense prefers, United States versus Knoll, KNOHL 379, Federal Reporter 2nd, 427 at page 437. That case upheld proceeding with a trial despite life-threatening illness, making accommodations which are consistent with Avila. Under the California Rules of Court 4.113, evidence has been presented now and has been received, but it does not prove that the ends of justice require a continuance. Thus, the motion for a mistrial is denied. The motion to adjourn is denied. We'll return. Are we ready for jurors?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, one last thing. Mr. DeGuerin indicated to me this morning that he has been told that Bob has a cardio appointment on Friday. Now, I don't know if that cardio appointment is different than the one he had scheduled Tuesday, but I have texted the attorney who I've been dealing with there to find out, so maybe that means he'll be available. I've also been told by Mr. DeGuerin, which is certainly his right, that if Mr. Durst is unavailable on Tuesday, that they do not want to be in court. So I don't know that we have a choice on that. I don't think we do.
So we'll see. I hope they were able to accomplish all the cardiological examinations at one time on Friday. It may well be different. We may miss a day.
Your Honor, I don't know if it'll make a difference, but the court probably has more influence than the county lawyers do. I don't know if the court's able to inquire or make a call to see if they can handle everything on Friday, or if the Tuesday appointment is necessary, if that can be, you know, put on Friday, but that's where we stand right now.
I'll look into it. I think some of the cardiological procedures that were proposed are specialized, and so I'm imagining that they're not the same that would be happening on Friday, but I don't know. I'll inquire.
That's my thought.
Okay. All right, I'll step out so that we may have our formal opening.
Please face the flag of our nation and recognize the principles for which it stands. Department 1 is now in session. The Honorable Mark E. Wyndham, Judge, presiding.
Please be seated, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Back in session, People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Chesnoff. So Mr. Lewis in the back. And Mr. Lewin, Mr. Milius, Mr. Bailey, and Mr. Miata, Mr. Henderson. All jurors and alternates are present. And Mr. Lewin, you may call your next witness.
People recall Doug Oliver.
Doug Oliver. Let's swear him again. Actually, he's already been sworn, so maybe I just keep him under oath. I guess it's up to me. It's a nice reminder. All right, welcome back, Mr. Oliver. I'm going to, let me just do another oath, just to make sure.
If you can stand, please, and raise your right hand and be sworn. Thank you. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give and the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated. For the record, please state and spell your first and last name.
Douglas Oliver, D-O-U-G-L-S-O-L-I-V-E-R.
Thank you.
All right, now we've rigged up that microphone so that it's going to be able to amplify your voice better. Okay, good, you're audible. And Mr. Lewin, you may resume your examination of Mr. Oliver.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Oliver, it's been, I think, a week since you testified. Have you had a chance at all to reflect on your prior testimony, or have you thought about it at all?
Yes,
And have you had any discussions with anybody about that testimony since you left the courtroom?
no,
Have you had any contact with the defense team at all?
no,
Have you any contact with Mr. Durst or indirectly with Mr. Durst?
no,
So in terms of the time that you've had to kind of consider, do you still consider yourself, as you sit there, to be a neutral and unbiased witness?
Can you repeat that again, please?
So as you sit there, do you still consider yourself to be a neutral and unbiased witness, which you said before that you thought you were?
Yes,
I assume, when did you arrive back here?
yesterday afternoon, 3:30.
And you had previously stated before, the quote was, you guys are never going to get me on a commercial flight. Do you recall saying that previously?
I don't recall it, but you said I said it. I guess I did.
I played it for you last time. You don't remember that?
Did I say it on the tape?
That's what was played in the courtroom.
I guess I did. I don't recall it, but I guess I did.
But you flew commercial and you made it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I want to go back to your 2001 interview with New York State investigator Joseph Becerra. I asked you about this previously, and this morning I showed you a copy of your report. Is that correct?
Yes, you showed me your copy.
And do you now recall telling Detective Becerra that you believe that Kathy had been a victim of white slavery because of her cocaine problem?
You only showed me part of that report, sir.
Did I show you the part that had your comment that Oliver thought Kathleen might have been sold into white slavery because of her cocaine problem?
You showed me that, but I did not say that.
Okay, so your position is that if the report says that you said it, that is wrong and incorrect, is that right?
Yes.
Do you recall, though, me asking you about that comment when you were interviewed back on October 30th, 2019?
Repetitious and
Overruled.
irrelevant.
Overruled.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
We had a lengthy conversation, recorded conversation on October 30th, 2019, correct?
Yes.
And during that conversation, do you recall being asked about that comment?
Well, I read the transcript of the conversation, and I recall that we talked about it. Yes.
And would you agree that you did not deny having made the comment during that interview, correct?
Well, I'm denying it now, sir.
Okay, I understand that. But you didn't deny it when you were confronted with it October 30th, 2019, correct?
I'm not sure if I denied or was affirmative.
Have you at times said, Mr. Oliver, that if you said it because you were trying to be, quote, funny, unquote?
Yes, I believe I said that.
So can you tell me what would be funny about that?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain what would be funny?
There's nothing's funny about it.
Well, so Mr. Oliver, when you said, if you said it, you were trying to be funny, can you explain what you would have meant by that?
I can't explain what I meant by it.
Would you agree that that would be an inappropriate and uncooperative comment?
No.
Can you explain then let me back up. Is your position that you believe that Kathy Durst was sold into white slavery because of a cocaine problem?
No.
Where did you even come up with that comment?
I believe that the officer offered me up certain possibilities, and I think now that I refresh my memory, that was one of the many he offered up. In addition to that, the entire document, because I did read it, has many inconsistencies and incorrect statements.
Well, so I want to back up. So your position is that Detective Becerra proposed to you as a possibility that Kathy Durst had been sold into white slavery because of her cocaine problem, and you simply agreed that that might be a possibility. Is that your testimony?
I believe, I never used that statement, and I'm not even sure what it means, and I believe that it was suggested to me. I can't recall how, but I just believe that after reading the document and seeing all the inconsistencies and the statements that are incorrect, that I think this is just another one of the statements that the officer made incorrectly.
Your attorney asked for transcripts of your prior statements, is that correct?
Which statement?
Your statements that you had given to law enforcement. You said you've been reviewing them, is that correct?
I was shown it last week.
And you were shown it by who?
My attorney.
Okay. And Have you reviewed any transcripts or any reports or discussed such things with your attorney, which certainly is your right to do, since you have been in court last week?
With my attorney?
Yes. Have you gone through, have you reviewed or discussed your prior statements? I'm not asking what your attorney told you. I'm asking if you discussed those statements or reviewed them with her.
We've discussed the case, yes.
Okay, do you not understand my question?
Not correctly, not really.
Okay, let me say it again. I don't know how it can be any plainer. Did you either review your prior reports with your attorney or discuss those prior reports with your attorney?
Your Honor, I think there's an attorney-client issue here.
That is incorrect. I'm not asking about content.
It's not overruled.
Which,
Who was back there overruled? I heard somebody over here say overruled. Maybe it was just an echo. Your Honor.
Yeah, I did overrule the objection. But that could be misunderstood, so run over there and pass him a note if you want, but no,
I
no,
think it
no.
was a worry about John's hearing.
Yeah, no, I should have brought it to my point.
I will say, Your Honor, I didn't, if you said it, I didn't hear, which is, again, I know the court's lost. You've gallantly given up your mic.
It was an echo, I guess.
So, Mr. Oliver, let me make my question simple. I'm going to divide it up. Have you personally reviewed any of your statements since you were in court last week?
can you tell me which statements you're referring to?
Mr. Oliver, please listen to my question. Have you reviewed any of the prior statements or interviews you have given in this case since you were in court last week?
Yes.
Have you been shown or discussed or reviewed any actual transcripts of prior reports or statements?
You mean like the phone calls?
Let's back up. You were given, correct, Mr. Oliver, your attorney was given the transcripts of your prior phone calls. Is that correct?
Wait, I wear hearing aids. I'm having a little bit of a problem. Wait a second.
Yeah. Me, I got two as well, so we're in the
I'm
same.
sorry?
I have two as well, so we're in the same boat.
Okay, well, I'm picking up some ambient sound.
I think we all are. There's a high-pitched sound. I don't see Mr. Durst wearing, oh, he does have one. He does have his on. I know that they've been reacting a little bit. Maybe we can check that. Yeah, because he's got a transcript here, so he can see what's the testimony.
The reason my hearing aids are making noise is telling me that they have to be updated.
Yeah, it's, I guess, like your alarm in your the smoke alarm. It's always goes off at like 2 a.m. and you have to take it down and change the batteries at an inopportune moment. So I think that may be what we're grappling with here. So I think, I'm not sure, you can enjoy that if you
Is
like.
that mine?
That's your souvenir water, yes.
From last time?
No. Is that from today? We can get him a fresh one. No, I'm curious. Who supplied him with water this morning? You did.
I promise it wasn't me, Mr. Oliver.
I think it's vodka.
Your Honor,
Yeah.
would you mind setting up all these, would you mind if I picked up these dirty napkins? It's annoying.
Here, why don't you step aside and, I've actually asked each party to, I don't know why, but there is some sort of a mess under this, under the witness stand. And, let's see here. Right, that's right. No, he's not asking. His question was this?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I'm not sure, so let's not try.
No, we don't know where that came from.
Okay, so.
Yeah, discard that one
But
too.
this,
Okay, but that's part of it, but we also,
it's been here
what
since
can we
last
do
week.
about cleaning up this?
I'll take care of it.
Okay?
I mean, Your
Maybe
Honor,
we'll just take a moment. No, we'll clean it up.
I'll do it for you, just give me
No.
something to do with it.
Here you go. Mr. Oliver, you can take the judicial trash can and put it to good use. You know, I noticed that last week, and they missed it. Yeah, let's talk with them about it.
The judicial check.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's very high quality.
And the water. Have a fresh water.
That's what?
A fresh water.
Yes, you may. Mr. Chesnoff, did you have, oh, here it is. There it is. That's good, right?
I like that. Thank you.
I'm working on the hearing aid issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chesnoff. So, all right, let's get our, all settled down and let's give them a moment to fix the hearing aid problem or ameliorate it. Mr. Luna, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver, I just want to establish that you were given access to transcripts of your prior phone calls and prior recorded interviews between the time you testified last time and today, correct?
Yes,
And did you in fact review those?
I read them.
I'm not asking what you said, I'm merely asking, did you discuss any of that with your attorney?
Yes,
Did you discuss any of it with anybody else other than your attorney?
no,
Are there any answers that you are aware of that you gave last Wednesday that you would want to change?
Overly broad.
Overruled?
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay. So I'm going to take one last try here. If you can explain to me, you had said you don't remember saying the comment about white slavery, and you've said that you believe if you said it, it was in response to Investigator Becerra, and then you also said that if you said it, you were trying to be funny. So let me ask you, can you tell me, if it's the last option, you're trying to be funny, what you would mean by that?
I really don't recall what I meant by it.
Well, is there something funny to you regarding Kathy Durst disappearing?
No, there's nothing funny about it at all.
Did you find something funny about it in 1982?
No,
Was there something about being interviewed by law enforcement trying to get information from you that you found to be funny?
no,
Were you the same level of cooperative, less cooperative, or more cooperative with law enforcement when you were interviewed in 2001 than you were during your conversations with me?
Vagueness.
Sustained.
I didn't hear the basis, Your Honor.
It's vague. I think that sort of thing's immeasurable.
Let me ask you, were you cooperative, in your opinion, with law enforcement in 2001?
yes,
Do you still believe, Mr. Oliver, that you have been cooperative with myself and Mr. Balian during the investigation of this case?
yes, I'm here.
Do you believe that you were cooperative in the interviews leading up to you being here?
Yes, I believe I'm cooperative.
And that was even after reviewing the transcripts?
Yes,
Okay, let's continue. Did you have any contacts with Susan Berman after Kathy Durst's disappearance?
yes.
And can you explain what that contact was?
She called me, a week or two, I'm not sure when she called me, and she told me that, yeah, she called me.
Well, and prior to that, you were making efforts to get a hold of Mr. Durst, and he wasn't responding, is that correct?
Yes, I tried to reach him after I read that his wife was missing in the New York Post.
And Susan called you, correct, and told you that going forward, in essence, she was going to be responsible for all press surrounding Kathy's disappearance, correct?
Well, she called me, and you told me that that's what she said. So I don't recall exactly what she said or what I read, but she did. That was the gist of the conversation.
Do you recall telling Investigator Becerra on December 19, 2001, that Susan called you and told you that Bob was very upset, but that he would call when things calmed down?
Yes,
Do you recall her also telling you that she was going to be responsible for all press surrounding Kathy's disappearance? Do you recall saying that to Investigator Becerra?
I do not recall saying it to him, but I did read it in the report.
And is it your memory that that is accurate or inaccurate?
I'm not sure if it was accurate.
Was it your impression, Mr. Oliver, based on your contact with Susan Berman, that in essence, after Kathy disappeared, that contact, even through Bob's friends, was going to go through her?
To the best of my recollection, I think, yes, any contact was going to go through her, she said.
Did that seem strange to you?
No.
And can you tell me why that didn't seem strange?
No.
Would it be normal in your interactions with your friends to have to go through another friend to speak to the friend you wanted to talk to?
I was respecting his wishes.
That wasn't my question. My question wasn't whether or not those were his wishes. My question was, did it seem strange to you that your close friend Bob Durst was not returning any of your calls, and that Susan Berman was telling you, hey Doug, any contact with Bob goes through me?
I didn't question it.
Okay, I understand you didn't question, so if you look back now and you think about it, does it seem strange now?
I can't answer that. I don't know. I mean, what I thought then or now?
Well, let's do both. What did you think then? You're trying to reach your friend.
I can't remember what I thought then.
Okay, what do you think now, looking back on it?
I don't think it was strange.
So I'm asking you, have you had that situation with other friends where you're trying to get a hold of a close friend and a third friend contacts you and says, hey, listen, you can't contact your friend, all contact goes through me? Has that ever happened to you in any other circumstance in your life?
I don't recall it ever happening.
So my question is, you're in your 70s now, the fact that that's never happened before, it's your testimony that even reflecting back, that doesn't cause you to say, gosh, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Overruled.
Can you repeat that again? It just went on so long.
Sure. So you've now testified that it doesn't seem strange to you, even looking back, that your close friend was having somebody else, a third person, call you to tell you that any contact with your friend had to go through her. And I'm asking you, in your 70 years, have you ever had that situation occur at any other time in your life?
I don't recall if it's occurred or not.
Would you agree, Mr. Oliver, that if it had occurred, that'd probably be something you'd remember?
Not necessarily.
Let me ask you, as we have this dialogue right now, would you characterize your demeanor and attitude right now as being cooperative and trying to provide information as best you can?
Relevance argument too.
Overruled.
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. By the way, has it been suggested to you by anybody, Mr. Oliver, that if a question is asked and you don't want to answer it, to just ask that it be repeated or say you don't understand it?
No, it has not.
Is that an idea you had on your own?
No.
All right, let me give it another shot here. You are now in your 70s.
Correct.
So I'm asking you, looking back now, no, actually that was not my question. I got to say it said, let me go back to what my question was. My question was, as you sit here today, in the answers that you are given, do you believe that you are being cooperative and just providing information as requested?
Repetitious.
Overruled. Repetitious is not an objection. Overall,
I'm cooperative. I'm here. What else can I do?
Okay. Please listen to Your Honor, could the court instruct Mr. Oliver, please listen to the question and answer what's being asked?
pardon me?
I said that was responsive.
Yeah,
This is
it's-
argumentative, Your Honor.
No.
No, please be seated. The answer illustrates your point, Mr. Lewin.
Okay, Mr. Oliver. I'm not asking you whether you're here today. Please listen to my question very carefully. I'm going to make it very simple. Do you believe that your demeanor and the way that you are answering questions today, right now, is in a cooperative and forthright manner?
Yes.
All right. At the time that Kathy disappeared, who would you say were Bob's closest friends?
Probably Susan and Nick and I can't recall. I mean,
Fair to say Susan and Nick were his closest friends, correct?
correct.
And would you also agree that Stuart Altman was a close friend or a friend?
He was a close friend, I believe.
Bert Almansky, A-L-M-A-N-S-K-Y.
I knew Bert.
Laura Lee Durst.
I don't remember Laura Lee, but I don't recall her.
Joanne Revson.
I remember Joanne, yes.
Do you recall being asked this very question by Detective Becerra?
Yes.
And in fact, isn't it true that you told him the following? You said Nick Chavin, you said Stuart Altman, you said Bert Almansky, you said Susan Berman, you said Laura Lee Durst, you said Joanne Revson, who you said was a close friend, you said Holly, girlfriend of Durst, Prudence Farrow, and then you said the owner of La Madeleine on 403rd West 43rd Street. Is that information that you provided?
Yes, I saw that in there.
So can you tell me, you previously said that you were unaware of Bob Durst ever being unfaithful to Kathy. Can you explain what you meant? Did you need me to move over, Your Honor?
Move over. I think you're
This way?
blocking the view of at least one juror. That's better. Thanks. I think it's better. You might want to scoot forward slightly. That's good. An inch or two.
I probably should lose some weight quickly. I think.
No, that's,
Can people see now, or?
see around you? Yeah. They're
Okay, all
good.
right.
That's better. And I can see them better now. Please
So,
ask your question again.
You previously have said that you were unaware of Mr. Durst being unfaithful to his wife, correct?
Correct.
So I'm trying to understand, why would you tell detectives that they should talk to Holly, quote, a girlfriend of Bob's?
I'm not sure when, I don't recall anyone named Holly today, and I'm not sure when Bob dated Holly, you know, because they asked me, I'm not sure what they asked me.
Wait, so let me back up. You don't know anybody named Holly, but then you say, and you're not sure when Bob dated this person you have no knowledge of. Is that your testimony?
Well, right, I don't recall anyone named Holly, okay, in my memory, and I don't know when he dated this person.
So let me ask you something, Mr. Oliver. Would you agree that if in 2001, and you've said you provided this information, you identified somebody named Holly and said they were a girlfriend of Bob's, that that would mean, because at the time you're being asked who Bob was close with at the time Kathy disappeared, that you were aware that Bob was in fact being unfaithful?
That's a multiple question.
What was the objection?
Let's see.
Compound.
I'll sustain, I'm not sure if it is. I'll sustain it, though. Will you carefully isolate the fact at issue with each
Yeah,
question?
The problem, Your Honor, is I have to
So
build
that's
in-
about 3 questions.
The problem is I have to deal in so I want you, I'll do it in this manner, okay? You have previously testified that you provided these names to Investigator Becerra, correct?
Well, that, That, what is that thing that he did? Was that a statement he made?
So I asked you
The
previous.
document, is that a statement that he made, or that was a document that reflected what he thought I said?
That is correct, and I asked you previously, within the last 5 minutes, whether or not you told Detective Becerra you mentioned these names, and you said yes, you did.
I don't recall telling him.
Okay, so what I'm asking you though is, I want you to assume for a moment that you said Holly, girlfriend of defendant. I want you to assume, in this hypothetical, that's what you said. That's in the report. My question would be for you to...
The report's inaccurate, sir.
So you're saying you never said that?
I don't know if I said it.
So if you don't know that you said it, how could it necessarily be inaccurate?
This is argumentative. It's just argument, Judge.
You're confused.
That's I'll sustain that one.
Mr. Oliver,
Though
So,
I don't want speaking objections.
I'm going to ask you again. Were you aware that Bob Durst was being unfaithful to his wife, to Kathy?
No.
So if you are telling a detective, I want you to assume that you told a detective, I'm having you assume this, that you named Holly, girlfriend of defendant, as somebody that he was close to, would your position be that you would not have understood that, in fact, she was a girlfriend?
That's hypothetical, not based on facts.
Sustained.
Your Honor, what's the objection?
Improper hypothetical is the way I took it.
Your Honor, can counsel, we're in California, can counsel make objections that are based on the evidence code? I know the court is helping with the objections, but I mean, this is a skilled
Don't
lawyer,
argue with
50
me,
years.
I sustain the objection, Mr. Lewin. Move to the next question.
Mr. Oliver, I want you to assume that you told Detective Becerra that a person that Bob was close to was Holly, who was a girlfriend. I'm having you assume that for a moment. Do you understand that?
Not really.
Okay.
Improper hypothetical.
I'll sustain it.
I
don't like
haven't
this.
even gotten to the hypothetical yet. Other
Yeah,
than,
it's going downhill already.
so,
Sustained.
who's Prudence Farrow?
She's a lady that Bob dated at some point after Kathy disappeared.
Well, do you know why, Mr. Oliver, you told Detective Becerra that Prudence Farrow was another person that Bob was involved with at the time of his wife's disappearance?
I don't believe that I was asked that question. I believe that the way the officer asked the question was, who are some of the people Bob knew? And this was 10 years, or was it 20 years after Kathy disappeared? And 8 years after I'd last seen him. So I mentioned people that I knew he was friendly with.
So, if the question was, at the time that Kathy disappeared, who were Bob Durst's closest friends, would that not have been clear to you that you were being asked who were his closest friends at the time Kathy disappeared?
That sounds like two questions. I apologize, but could you
No, one is
make that a little simpler for me?
Let me see if I can dumb it down. So,
Excuse me, I didn't hear you.
Sidebar remark. Objection.
No sidebar, but that's not appropriate. We treat every witness with some modicum of respect. You've
well,
gone below that.
I'm certainly trying, Your Honor.
No, that's not respectful, and that's not appropriate. Don't do that with a witness.
Mr.
You may
Oliver.
try patiently and politely to restate the question so it can be understood.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask the court to, I don't believe that the court believes that there is a lack of understanding of my questions. Can the court...
This is for the jury.
Well,
Your
but, Your Honor,
question, listen, your question was imperfect, all right? It was imperfect, so perfect.
All right. Mr. Oliver. At the time of your interview with Investigator Becerra, were you asked who Bob's closest friends were at the time Kathy disappeared?
I don't recall what he asked me.
I want you to assume for a moment Mr. Oliver, that in fact you were asked that question. Do you understand? You're going to assume that in fact you were asked that question.
I don't know how to assume that.
You don't know? Okay, I'm gonna explain to you how to assume it. I want you to assume right now.
I don't like the question either, actually, Mr. Lewin. I don't think it's the right way to, there's
Well,
a different way to get at this information.
Your Honor, I've asked him directly. I presented hypotheticals.
Yeah, no, I don't think hypothetical either. He denies it, call a witness, you know?
Well, I'm certainly planning on doing that, Your Honor, but I want to be able to confront this witness with the statement that he's made.
Okay.
I'll go a third way. Would it help you, do you want to look at the report again? Go to page, bring it up on my computer. One moment. Let's go this way.
What do you need?
Yes.
Showing you LADA 079505. I want you to read to yourself, starting at this line, right there.
This is not the entire document.
Mr. Oliver, I've asked you to look at the document and to read what I asked you to read. I can ask the judge to ask you to do that if you prefer.
No,
Don't quarrel.
Show me where you want me to read from?
I want you to read from right here,
Yes.
and I want you to read down to right here.
Could I have a citation?
Okay.
Can you let Mr. DeGuerin know which?
505.
What word to what word?
Starting with the line, Oliver.
Where do you want me to start?
Oliver
No,
was,
you want to start here or this here?
No, Oliver was-
You're confusing me. Come on,
I'm
please.
confusing you.
John, please.
Let me show you.
Show me some respect.
Oliver was asked about Friends of Durst back.
Please.
Oliver was asked about Friends of Durst back then. That's where you're gonna start. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line, and you're gonna go down to
Is-
where it says Prudence Sparrow. I want you to read that to yourself.
Okay, I will.
Just let me know when you're done.
You want me to read this too?
No, I just want you to read to right where it mentions Prudence Sparrow, the end of that line.
You just want me to read the Prudence Fair? You don't want me the owner of the Madeleine? You want me to read about that?
You don't, you can read for this purpose. You know what, it's fine. You can read to the end of that paragraph.
Okay, so let's get this straight. You want me to read the here,
whole thing,
not
be
the
faster.
here? Right?
You know what, Mr. Oliver, let's make it easy. Read the entire page. Let us know when you're done.
Okay.
Mr. Oliver,
May I keep this?
Let him finish.
I thought you were done reading it. Are you
Done?
done reading it?
May I keep it?
Can you keep it? No, you
I mean, may I keep it while I'm testifying?
No, not unless Mr. Lewin says so.
May I keep it?
Well, I'll tell you what, if I'll ask you from here so I can show it to you if the judge gives me permission.
No,
Yeah,
you
go
can stand.
all the way back.
You can stand.
I like him questioning witnesses right
Your Honor, do you want me, Mr. DeGuerin, would you like me to put this up on the Elmo so we can see it or no?
No, I'd like you to just forget about it.
Well, I'm sure you would, Mr. DeGuerin. Yes. Okay, so, Mr. Oliver, isn't it true that you were asked about, quote, friends of Durst back then who may have information that may be useful?
I don't recall whether I was asked. All I can say after reading it, that that's what's in there.
Okay. Are you denying that you referred to Holly as a girlfriend of Durst's?
That's what the officer said I said.
Okay. Are you denying that you referred to Prudence Farrow as a girlfriend of Durst, Mia's sister?
I don't recall ever saying that.
Okay, is it still your position, Mr. Oliver, that you had no knowledge of Mr. Durst being unfaithful, having girlfriends, at the time that Kathy disappeared?
I have no knowledge of him being unfaithful.
Is that something that you think you'd remember, or do you think you maybe just forgot?
I think I remember if he was unfaithful, yes.
Okay. Are you aware of Prudence Farrow and Bob Durst, from Mr. Durst, him telling you that they had a romantic relationship?
Yes.
Now, isn't it true that you said in your 2019 interview that you didn't know anything about an alleged relationship between your friend Bob Durst and Prudence until you read about it shortly before your 2019 interview?
When did I make that statement?
You wrote that statement that I just showed you is from 2001.
Okay.
In 2000
That was 20 years after the event, right?
That's correct. So here's my question. In 2019, you said that you had no knowledge about any relationship between Bob Durst and Prudence Farrow until you had read about it shortly before the 2019 interview. Can you explain that inconsistency?
So there was 40 years. Wait, I'm trying to understand this. I can't explain that. Yes, I can explain it.
So what I'm asking is obviously in 2001, the report says that you mentioned Prudence Farrow and Holly as girlfriends of defendant, correct?
Quoting from a report that's not in evidence.
That's not an objection, Your Honor.
Yes, it is.
Excuse me, wait a second. Your objection is hearsay?
Hearsay, not in evidence.
Okay, overruled.
You can answer, Mr. Oliver.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Yes, I'll repeat it again.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Okay,
you.
sure. Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
I'm not asking about the 40 years that have gone by. I'm asking you the following. In 2001, the report says that you mentioned Prudence Farrow and Holly as being girlfriends of defendant at the time Kathy disappeared. You've read that now, correct?
Yes, I read the report.
Okay, my question is, in 2019, you said you had no knowledge of Bob Durst ever having been involved with Prudence Farrow until you read about it a few days before the 2019 interview. Do you recall saying that?
No, I don't recall saying that.
If you said that, would it be accurate?
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay, let's go this way. When did you find out that Bob Durst had a relationship with Prudence Farrow?
I don't recall.
Did you find out before 2019?
Yes.
Did you find out about it before 2001?
Yes.
You would agree you would have to know about it before 2001 or you couldn't have communicated that information to detectives, correct?
I keep on saying, I don't know if that report is accurate.
Okay, but now you've said you did know about the relationship with Prudence Farrow and Bob Durst before 2001. So my question is, why did you say during your 2019 interview that you had just found out about that relationship? You knew nothing about it until a few days before the 2019 interview. Can you explain that?
Compound question.
Overruled. You may answer.
Well, that is, I'm sorry, Mr. Lewin. You're gonna have to repeat that again.
Can the court reporter read it back, Your Honor?
Yes, I'll ask her to do that. Will you please?
Now, you said you did know about the relationship with Prudence Farrell and Bob Durst before 2001. So my question is, why did you say during your 2019 interview that you had just found out about that relationship and knew nothing about it until a few days before the 2019 interview?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
I don't know.
Would you agree, Mr. Oliver, that if you had relayed the information in 2001, which you now have said you did, strike that. Would you agree that if you were aware of the relationship in 2001, which you now have said you were, that saying in 2019 that you just found out about the relationship when you read about it the night before would be inconsistent?
Argumentative.
Overruled.
Can you make that a little more clear for me? I'm sorry, I'm having real, I think you asked me 3 things there.
Your Honor,
You asked one thing, but there are about 5 commas in the sentence.
because
in other
I
words,
have to-
you're giving it this elaborate scenario before you pose the actual question.
because
So
the foundational facts are dependent, the question is dependent upon the foundational facts. Your Honor,
that's all. You can ask all 5 again.
All right, Mr.
Okay?
Oliver.
Quickly, like 3 or 4 words.
Listen.
Really easy questions, and there's no excuse for not understanding.
Listen to me
You
close.
think he doesn't, he does understand, he's telling you he doesn't. It's clear if you keep
All
your
right.
questions down to 4 or 5 words.
All right, Mr. Oliver. You knew about Prudence Farrow back in 2001, correct?
That's, by the way,
Yes,
that's
the
8 words, not-
document says
That's
that.
8 words, not 4 or 5, as the court.
I'm sorry, don't do that. He said yes.
Okay. You stated in 2019, during the interview, that you just found out about Prudence Farrow the night before the interview, correct?
I don't recall saying that.
You reviewed the transcript of that interview yourself and with your lawyer prior to testifying, correct?
I looked over the transcript, yes.
Do you need me to pull the clip and play it for you?
No,
So what I'm asking, Mr. Oliver, do you agree, you looked at the transcript, that you said during the 2019 interview that you did not know about the relationship between Bob and Prudence Farrow until you read about it the night before the interview in 2019?
if that's what I said, then that stands.
Okay, so here's my question. Can you explain, Mr. Oliver, how you could have provided the information in 2001 about Prudence, or known about, strike that, I'll restate it. Can you explain how, if you knew about the information in 2001, that you can now say in 2019, I just found out about it the day before? Can you explain that?
No,
Would you agree, Mr. Oliver, that that would be your 2019 statement untruthful?
no.
What would you characterize it as?
I'm only stating what I believe I remember.
All right, let's continue. Were you aware from Mr. Durst, Bob Durst, that he was originally supposed to take over as head of the Durst organization?
No,
Were you aware, Mr. Oliver, that Mr. Durst was originally, as the oldest son, supposed to take over as head of the Durst organization?
yes.
How were you aware of that information?
His father mentioned it to me.
Okay. And did you ever have a conversation with that, about that with Bob?
I don't recall if we ever talked about it.
Were you aware that Mr. Durst, Bob Durst, was very unhappy with the fact that he was not going to be named the head of the Durst organization?
When?
Well, I'm going to start with ever, and then I'll get closer. Were you ever aware of that?
I was only aware of it from what I read in the papers, after, I'm not when, in the last 39 years. Okay?
So you're saying you never had a conversation with Bob Durst ever about the fact that he was upset that he was being passed over in favor of his younger brother?
No, he wasn't being passed over when I knew him.
Mr. Oliver, you are aware that Mr. Durst ended up leaving New York shortly after he was passed over for leadership of the Durst organization, correct?
No.
You were not aware of that?
Which?
What year?
Compound.
Overrule.
How did
What year?
How did you find out Mr. Durst had left New York City?
From Nick Chapin.
Do you remember when that was?
Nick Chavin, he said.
I'm sorry.
Do you remember when that was?
Excuse me?
Do you remember when that was that you found out about it?
It was several, I can't remember what it was, I think it was 1992. I think it was 1992.
Okay, is it fair to say that you found out about Bob Durst leaving New York near the time that he left New York?
I don't know what date he left New York.
In other words, Mr. Oliver, if Mr. Durst left New York in the mid-90s, you found out about him having left New York in the mid-90s.
I never knew he left New York. I just knew he stopped talking to some of his friends.
Well, isn't it true that in fact, you ended up finding out from Nick Chavin at that time that he had left New York?
Invites hearsay.
Not for the truth of the matter asserted.
Overrule. For limited purpose, not for the truth or whether of the assertion. You may answer.
The judge told you could answer.
What was the question?
Okay. You found out from Nick Chavin near the time that Bob Durst disappeared that
I can't
Bob...
hear you. You have to speak a little louder. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Mr. Oliver,
Thank you.
Oh, come on.
you found out near the time that Mr. Durst left New York from Nick Chavin that he had left New York. Is that correct?
I didn't know he left New York. Nick Chavin said to me, I haven't seen Bobby. Would you like to help me find him?
Did you eventually, Mr. Oliver, learn that Mr. Durst had left New York?
Yes.
And did you learn the reason why Mr. Durst had left New York?
No.
So you're saying, as you sit here, you still have no idea why Mr. Durst left New York?
I have no reason to even think about why he left. He just left.
You watched The Jinx, correct?
I don't recall it, sir.
Did you watch The Jinx?
I watched some of it.
Did you watch the part in The Jinx where they explained that Bob Durst had left New York because he was passed over for leadership of the Durst organization?
I don't recall watching that part.
And are you saying you've never had a conversation with Bob Durst in all of these years, not one regarding him being passed over in favor of his brother?
No, because we stopped talking before it happened.
So you said a moment ago that Mr. Durst was not passed over, correct? Do you recall testifying to that?
Incorrect.
Yes, sustained.
Did you previously testify, Mr. Oliver, that in fact Mr. Durst was not passed over?
You mean earlier today?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't believe he was passed over.
So if you have never discussed anything with him, how do you have that information that he was not passed over? Where does that emanate from?
That's just my thought. I have no information from anyone directly.
So why did you say he was not passed over? What's that based on?
Incorrect. That's not his statement.
That's what he said.
Just a second. Why did you say he was not passed over? What's that? overruled. Explain why you're saying he wasn't passed over. You just don't know? Or you said that, but you also
Okay.
suggested that you knew a different reason.
No, I don't know. This is the judge instructed me, I don't know.
No, I'm not instructing you, you don't know. You had suggested that with an earlier answer. I don't know if that's correct, because you also seemed to me were suggesting that's not why.
Excuse me, Your Honor, but one is knowledge of the fact and the other is opinion.
That's not
And
it.
and it's confusing knowledge with what
It's,
he thinks.
I think there is a problem with the inquiry because it's limiting the possibilities. In other words, it's assuming that one is based on the other.
Well, I'll ask the simple question.
Yeah.
Mr. Oliver, what do you base your opinion on that Bob Durst was not passed over for leadership of the Durst organization?
Because at the time you're talking about, Seymour Durst was running the company. So I have no idea how the succession was going to go.
So you were aware that Seymour Durst died in the early 90s, correct?
I know he died, yes.
And you were aware that after he died, Douglas Durst ended up becoming head of the Durst organization, correct?
I'm aware of it. I found that about many years later.
Aren't you actively involved in real estate in New York, Mr. Oliver?
Yes?
So you're telling me that one of the largest owners of commercial real estate in Manhattan, in an area that you yourself operate in, that you had no idea that Douglas Durst had taken over as head of the Durst organization until years later?
Compound based on assumptions.
There's nothing compound.
Okay, hold on. Based on assumptions and compound. Okay, well, wait a second. Oh, okay, overruled. You had no idea? The question is, did you had no idea that Douglas Durst had taken over as head of the Durst organization years later?
I don't recall.
Mr. Oliver, didn't you actually have parcels where you shared ownership or were involved in a business relationship with the Durst organization?
That's not an accurate description of that piece of property.
Give us an accurate description of that piece of property.
I believe that the children of Seymour Durst owned a property that was adjacent to a property I had, and but not the Durst organization.
Do you follow, Mr. Oliver, in your position as a real estate investor, do you follow New York real estate news?
Of course.
And have you followed that religiously for many, many years?
I followed it. You know, it's not a religion, sir.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Oliver.
You're welcome.
My question is, as someone who is a real estate investor, you follow real estate news in New York very carefully, correct?
Relevance.
What was the objection, Your Honor?
Relevance.
Yeah, I'm thinking about sustaining that.
Think hard.
The relevance, Mr. Lewin?
The relevance is that Mr.
I
Oliver,
would object to him stating,
Okay,
making a
let's
speech.
Okay, let's try off the record sidebar first. Okay? Off the record.
Your Honor,
Yes?
to save time, I'll go back to this one later. I don't want to waste the court's time right now.
Very good. After the break, we'll contemplate whether you will go back to this. Go to your next point.
Oh, I
then.
thought you were just saying we were taking a break.
No,
Oh,
when we
okay.
take a break,
See, it
we'll
seemed
discuss.
early. It
No,
seemed
no,
early,
no,
but
no.
okay. Time is kind of standing still for me over here, so it seems later than it's only 10. It seems like
I know you
4
want it to
o'clock.
last, but it's not.
Seems like 4 o'clock.
Not
I don't know
standing still
why.
for us, it's we're dragging out.
All right, so Mr. Oliver, to the best of your memory, when did you find out that Douglas Durst was the head of the Durst organization?
I don't recall.
Would you agree that, given how closely you follow New York news, that it would have been at or near the time that he was appointed?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that again?
would it be correct that, given how closely you follow New York real estate, that you would have almost certainly learned of Douglas Durst's appointment as leading the Durst organization at or near the time that it happened?
I don't know how to answer that. Because the Durst organization weren't the type of people that sought publicity, and I don't believe they were a family that was so secure in themselves that they didn't have to publicize it.
I want you to assume for a moment, Mr. Oliver, that there was an announcement that appeared in the New York Times and in Wall Street, the Wall Street Journal, that Douglas Durst was taking over as head of the Durst organization. Would that have been something that you believe you would have seen?
Improper hypothetical.
Under what basis?
Okay, no. Okay, overruled.
Was there an announcement?
Mr. Oliver, listen to my question. I ask, you get to answer. Listen to the question. I want you to assume, hypothetically, you are assumed that there were announcements in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal announcing that Douglas Durst was taking over as head of the Durst organization. Is that something that if it were in those periodicals you believe you would have seen at or near the time?
I don't know if I've ever seen it or not.
Overruled.
All right.
The answer may stand.
What periodical do you read and did you read in the 90s with respect to New York real estate?
We're getting a far afield. I'd like you to focus.
All right. Is it difficult for you to consider that your friend Bob Durst could have killed his wife?
I don't believe it was.
That's asking for an opinion on a fact.
Overruled.
I didn't hear his answer, Your Honor.
I didn't hear it either. Could you read it back? I don't believe.
That's all I heard, I don't believe.
I don't believe.
That's not a complete answer. Again, let me ask the question again. Is it difficult for you to even consider the idea that your friend Bob Durst could have killed his wife?
I don't believe he killed her.
So I want to ask you, I want you to assume for a moment, if he did kill her, would that be something difficult for you to consider or accept?
Improper.
This goes to the witness's
Sustained.
bias, Your Honor.
It would, but I don't think that, I agree with Mr. DeGuerin, it's not a proper hypothetical.
Would you agree that the Bob Durst you know, you cannot see him dismembering a corpse?
Irrelevant and improper.
Sustained.
Are you aware, Mr. Oliver, that your close friend Bob Durst has admitted to dismembering a corpse?
Relevance.
Sustained.
Your Honor, I'd like to, this needs a sidebar. and
No,
offer
I
proof.
think the whole thing needs a sidebar. So let's take our break, ladies and gentlemen. It's a bit early, it's 10:10. I'll have you back at 10:30. We need 5 minutes to talk about this. So do not talk about the case. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. First of all, this witness is not at this time a character witness. He's not a character witness for Mr. Durst. So confronting him with these questions about dismemberment, for instance, is not. I don't think that's appropriate.
Let me explain, Your Honor, my offer of proof. So the witness, there are a couple of different reasons why the witness can be so evasive. One of them is that he's lying to cover up for Mr. Durst, and one of them is that because Bob Durst is a close friend of his, that he just cannot get himself to even contemplate the idea that Bob Durst could have done this. And in
Well,
fact,
that's not likely, and
Well,
I don't think
well,
that's probative, and that's not really probative either. The question is whether he is biased. So you have demonstrated, I believe, lies, repeated lies by this witness, all right? I think that you have, on the other hand, you're not satisfied with that. You're going forward with hypotheticals based upon premises that you cannot prove, all right? A premise is based on him imagining a state of affairs that he denies, and you can't do that. The other problem is you're leading a witness. I know you don't ordinarily lead witnesses. You rarely get the opportunity to cross-examine, but these questions are convoluted. What you can do when you're leading is, you read it, you saw it, you denied it, you can't explain it. These are 3 or 4 word questions that you can ask that no one can. Otherwise, Mr. Lewin, the jury might think, Mr. Lewin just can't be understood, right? You're not as clear as you could be, so you are not getting what you were trying to get out of this witness, which is to show that he's being evasive and deceitful. You're not accomplishing that when you ask such convoluted questions.
Well, Your Honor, again, the court's going to rule. I just want to make my record and let the court know.
Yeah,
what my
okay,
position
make your
is.
record.
My position is as follows. I am not required to have one theory as to why Mr. Oliver is lying, etc. Some people might want to decide, I don't think it's the case, that Mr. Oliver isn't lying, that what's going on is he's in such denial about who his friend is that he can't even contemplate it. I'm not speculating. I asked him these questions.
His motive for lying doesn't really matter as much as that he is lying and he is evasive.
No, the issue would be, Your Honor, is that there is an argument that Mr. Oliver is not lying. That's what's happening is he's in such denial that he refuses to even contemplate. And Your Honor, if I could just...
That's a lie. I'm sorry, it's a lie.
Well, Your Honor, the witness has said, so as an example, the dismemberment is not an improper hypothetical. The witness has said, I asked him, is it difficult for you to ever consider that your friend Bob Durst could have killed his wife? He said, the Bob Durst I know, no, would never have done that. He says, I don't want to even think about my friend doing it.
All right, this all stems from you asking the question in the first place, so probably I should have sustained the objection.
Of?
You know, about this guy, you can't contemplate, you can't imagine that your friend killed.
Well, Your Honor, I understand, the court is basically saying...
You're setting it up, okay, maybe that question is all right to show some sort of a bias or that he's not realistic, but then you're contradicting his explanation, and so you're opening up this whole world of wrongdoing by Mr. Durst that then you're going to display point by point to this jury, and that's going too far. That's imbalanced.
Well, Your Honor, then I guess, one moment. Your Honor, if the court is basically saying that under 352, you know what, you've done enough, I understand. The problem is I can only respond to the objections that are being asked. It's not an improper hypothetical. It's not a hearsay violation. If the court says, you know, under 352, Mr. Lewin, you've shown this guy to be a liar, everybody in the courtroom knows it, and at this point in time, you're wasting too much of the court's time, I understand that. That makes sense. If it's 352 objection, I get it. The problem is, if the court is phrasing it as a different objection, it puts me in the position of having to explain why it isn't. So if the court's making it 352...
Yeah, I didn't hear that objection. I agree with you. I didn't really think the objections were always correct, but for me, I do think this is, a lot of it's relevant, not all of it, and I do, so some of the objections I heard I did not sustain, but I do think that this line of questions is more prejudicial than probative under 352.
Then I'll move on. I would ask the court, Your Honor, and I understand this, and I know that the court, it would not happen on our end. The court has told, I've tried to refrain, and I think I've done pretty well since the court's instructed me, to not have speaking objections. Counsel, they have not only speaking objections, the objections they make are not legal grounds, and the court will literally say, well, close enough, or I'm not sustaining this ground. Your Honor, these are 50, 60-year lawyers. It's not fair, and it puts me in a position where I cannot respond, to allow them to make objections that are not even objections under California law. Can they be instructed?
Mr. Lewin, an improper objection is going to be overruled. If the term, for instance, if Mr. DeGuerin were to say multifarious instead of compound, I know what he means, and you know what he means, I'm going to sustain that objection if it is an appropriate objection. If it's not appropriate, I'm not going to sustain it. So we do have perhaps different language. You have continued to make and meet objections with a description of the underlying law and relevance as if the court did not know these things. You need to trust the court. Perhaps your mastery of the evidence code is unequaled, but I do understand 99% of your objections. A couple of times you throw me, but and I disagree with you, but you do not need, and I'm giving you a way out here, saying, because it also can be seen as a speech to the jury, and I think both sides have done that. I think Mr. DeGuerin has been doing a little grandstanding, and you've done it more. So I don't want you either to do that anymore. Make your objection and state the grounds. Otherwise, you just have to. Mr. Chesnoff has a word.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Now that we've moved on from this phase and Mr. Lewin's going to move on to another phase, may I ask for some offer of proof, Your Honor, because I understand him impeaching, but I don't understand what the relevant testimony is that's substantive that he is impeaching him about.
I understand that that Mr. Oliver is actually your witness and that you are eliciting testimony favorable to your case. He did testify to some damaging facts, I believe. Last time I noted carefully what he said, and he has material that you are going to use in your argument, I'm sure. So Mr. Lewin is perfectly entitled to impeach to great lengths, I think, and I've allowed that so far.
Now I understand, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Recess.
Thank you.
Enjoy your